Racial and Cultural Appropriation and Peace Studies.
Racial appropriation. It can be defined as a constitutional act of taking something from one's own benefit or gain, and it is usually not expressed permission from the owner, and it has been applied to or can be applied to any aspect of one's life. It is used as aspect of race and has become a racial appropriation, which is the act of subjugating one race for the benefit of the other. For example, slavery. Results are Black Lives Matter or BLM movement, in which Black Americans today are fighting for their lives after their dark history in America, in which they were treated as slaves and nothing more as just a tool for their own gain or their own race. Dark history in America was segregation, which was started in the US, south of USA. It was Jim Crow that law and legalized racial segregation during the late 19th century and the 1950s. What is segregation? What is segregation? Segregation is the separate or isolation of race, class, or ethnic group by enforced or voluntary residence in a restricted area by barriers, social intercourse, or by separating them to educational facilities or any type of discriminatory means. Those examples are redlining. Redlining are illegal discriminatory practice in which mortgages lender denies or allows loans, and insurance providers restrict services to certain areas of the community. It often happens due to racial characteristics of the appliances neighborhood or the person who is applying. Movies in which showcase racial appropriation in America. Hidden Figures by Theodore Melfi, Django Unchained by Quentin Tarantino, and 12 Years a Slave by Steve McQueen.
Philippine indigenous races. Igorot, IP's name in Luzon, indigenous peoples. Igorot is what we call mountaineer. Any of various ethnic groups in the mountains of northern Luzon, Philippines, all of whom keep or have kept until recently their traditional religion and way of life. Some live in the tropical forests of the foothills. When we say foothills, mga nugbo nga bundok that they can live, but most live in rugged grassland and pine forest zones higher up. They numbered about 1.5 million in the early 21st century. Abras tingguan apayaws bundok gadang isneg kalinga binggets ibaliaw kankay, or what we also call the Itneg, live in the mountainous area of Abra in northern western Luzon, who descended from immigrants from Kalinga Apayao and the northern Kankay. They refer to themselves as Itneg, though the Spaniards called them Tingguan when they came to the Philippines because they are mountain dwellers. The Tingans are further divided into nine distinct, which are Adasin, Mabaka, Gubang, Banao, Binongon, Danak, Mayudan, Dawangin, and Iliod. Ifugao, Kalingas, Bundok, Gadang, Isnag Mountain Province, Bundok, and Nueva Ecijas, Ilonggo. Now, Ifugao is named after the term Ipugo. E or I from people, and Pugu is like hill, which translated to people of the hill. Alternatively, the province name may have come from the word Pugao, which means the cosmic earth. Ipugao then referring to mortals. Now, finally, the name may have been derived from Ipugo, a type of grain in local mythology given to the people by Matungulan, the god of grains. And the rice terraces of the Philippines, Cordilleras, and Banawi rice terraces are the main tourist attractions made by our dearest Ifugaos. Lumad, IP's name in Mindanao. Bangsamoro region, Tiruray or Teduray, Caragas region, Banawaon, or Banwan, Talanding, or Talaandig, Manubo, Kamingin, Maanwa, Davos region, Gienga, Manubo Atta, Tagabawa, Tak- Tagakaulo or Tagakaulo, Mandaya, Mansaka, Calagan, Tibuli or Tagabili, North Mindanao's region, Bu- Bukidnon, Manubo Ata, region, Blaan, Higonon, Manwa, Manubo Ata, Talangan, Tasaday, Kulaman, and Sangil. The Lumad are groups of Austronesian indigenous people in the southern Philippines. It is a Cebuano term meaning native or indigenous. The Lumad include groups such as the Iromenan de Monovu, as I've already read those groups, and they're considered as vulnerable groups because they live in hinterlands, forests, lowlands, and coastal areas. Racial appreciation. Lumad killings. The Lumad who have defended their lands from incursions have long accused the governments of neglecting their rights in favor of a big business. A 2020 Global Witness report said that at least 43 Philippine land rights advocates, many of them Lumad communities, were killed in 2019. So the Lumad killings in Mindanao, Philippines are Lumad communities contended with extrajudicial killings. When we say extrajudicial killings are when someone in an official position deliberately kills a person without any legal process. And red tagging. Red tagging, defenders of indigenous land rights, environmentalists, and human rights activists have also been harassed. The land are people from various ethnic groups in Mindanao Island. Now, racial appropriation. Music that depicts this event. Asin, masdan mo ang kapaligiran. Bayan ko. Balita, ang bayan kong sinilangan. So, I've heard this song, The Asin, Masdan mo ang kapaligiran, bayan ko sinilangan, uh, but not this one, the Balita. But anyways, music or songs is also very helpful in recollecting some historical events.
When talking about racial appropriation, we can't avoid the topic of cultural appropriation, as the word race and culture is awfully connected with each other, as each race has its own unique culture, which it represents. So, first, let us define what is cultural appropriation. So, cultural appropriation is the use of object and or element of a non-dominant culture in ways that either disrespect the sanctity of the material. So this means that a much more dominant or a much more famous race used the culture of a non-dominant or a lesser famous race wrongly, or there is a misuse of culture in a way that this is disrespecting the trace, disrespecting the culture. The next meaning is discredit the origin of the material. So, which this means that a certain culture or a certain practice is being taken away or stolen from a certain race in which it is being used without the credit or without the permission of the race. The next is reinforce stereotypes. As Asians, I think are all familiar with stereotyping because I think we are the most stereotyped race among all, calling us yellow skin or stereotyping us of being an overachiever. So we are culturally appropriated when the stereotype against us is being reinforced or encouraged, and that is a way of culturally appropriating. And lastly is to contribute to racial oppression, which means that a certain culture is being used to oppress the owner of that culture. There is the use of a certain culture to oppress or downgrade a certain race that owns it. The first example of cultural appropriation is whitewashing in visual entertainment. Whitewashing is a casting practice in the film industry in which white actors are cast in a non-white roles, which means that a supposed to be character of a person with color is being filled with a white person. The latest controversy about this practice, I think, is the casting of the Wings Club adaptation. I mean, who doesn't like Wings Club, right? I think I really like Wings Club because of the fashion of it. And aside from it, the most important factor that I like about Wings Club is the variation of its character. We have a blend, we have a brunette, we have an Asian, we have black, African. There is really a variety of its character. And I am really expecting, personally, I am really expecting the adaptation of it to reality TV. But people are disappointed that a supposed to be character of an Asian is being casted by a white person. The next example of cultural appropriation is the model minority myth. Operates on the belief that minorities can control their fate and overcome roadblocks they might encounter, and those who cannot succeed are just not trying hard enough. So I think this is an implication of the stereotypes for us Asian. The best example for this is the situation of the Asian American citizens, in which Asians are staying in America, in which they are already a citizen, considered a citizen in there, because there's this myth in which pressures them, stereotypes them that Asian are supposedly to achieve better than American. They are stereotyped to be doctors, lawyers, smart, silent but deadly, good at math and science, hardworking, like that. But of course, not all Asian American are supposed to be like that, but they are stereotyped to belittle them. Forms of cultural appropriation can occur through first intellectual property, such as stories and knowledge of the indigenous peoples not being recognized nor credited in research material. I think the best example for this rather is in K-pop industry, in which the idea of a certain culture is being stolen or being used in a music video without the credit of them. Next is artifacts such as American Indian feather headdresses worn in visual media without consent or credit, which means that um, the best example for this is the costume or the way that a certain race is dressing is being used for visual entertainment without its credit, or they are being respected using that traditional costume or dressing of a certain race. The next is dance, such as voguing being credited to Madonna instead of the LGBTQIA community in the United States, which means that a certain practice or a certain tradition that a certain group owns is being credited to another person because that person is much more famous. So that is an example of cultural appropriation.
Clothing and fashion such as Gucci selling US dollars 800 turbans as an accessory, whereas silk wear them as a symbol of devotion to their faith. Language, such as the English language used by white people being the proper way to speak the language. Music, such as rock music, where white people were credited for the genre and finding success, while black people have been playing this genre for years and struggle to gain recognition. Food, such as Filipino running an eat all you can samgyeopsal business, never knowing that Koreans eat samgyeopsal as a bar food. Religious symbols such as the revered Manri symbol of Buddhism being converted into the infamous swastika used by Nazis. Decoration, such as selling something as an ethnic decoration instead of naming where it comes from. medicine, such as ridiculing traditional medicine that truly works while accepting pseudoscientific medicine, such as homeopathy, crystal therapy, and Chinese medicine as alternatives. Makeup, such as the fox eye makeup trend in TikTok that accentuates the eyes to be more slanted, while Asians had to do eyelid surgery because their natural slanted eyes were ridiculed and mocked. Hairstyle, such as the corn rows as okay on whites but not on people of color, whereas it originally is worn by black people. Tattoos, such as Chinese script used as tattoos, never knowing what these scripts means, and wellness practices such as people doing yoga without researching its religious roots.
I think we can now realize how hateful is racial and cultural appropriation, and it is a big issue. So, what is the solution to this big issue? The answer is peace studies. So, peace studies is an interdisciplinary field that cements itself on the studies on political science, sociology, history, anthropology, theology, psychology, philosophy, and other related fields to provide one with an understanding of how armed conflicts begin, to give ways on how to prevent and resolve them, and to build peaceful and just systems and societies. So this literally means that peace studies is basically a class in which political science, politics is being discussed, sociology, the importance of society and the unison of it, the history of how our all countries' history is interrelated, anthropology, theology, study of beliefs on God, psychology, philosophy, and other fields. To prevent war, to prevent disconnection and disrespect. Peace studies aims to first appropriate intellectual and emotional development of the individuals, which means that there is appropriation and development of the intellect and emotional within the individual studying peace studies. The next is to develop a sense of social responsibility and solidarity. And person who studies peace study tend to develop a sense of social responsibility and solidarity, which means that they tend to avoid conflict within the society. The third one is to observe the principle of equality and fraternity towards all, which means that if you study peace study, then you tend to develop or root your principles to maintain equality, or you tend to give more importance to equality and see the importance of fraternity or brotherhood within the society, which tend to promote and advocate peace. The next, or the fourth one and the last one, is enabling individual to acquire a critical understanding of differences, which means that we will be more open-minded when we study peace studies, open-minded to differences and disagreements or others' perspective.
Here are some examples of peace studies. First is the hippie movement. The hippie movement is a countercultural movement that rejected the mores of mainstream American life. This originated in college campuses in the United States, although it spread to other countries, including Canada and Britain. This movement advocates nonviolence and love, a phrase being make love, not war, which sometimes called flower children. Next one is the funk movement. Punk political ideologies are mostly concerned with individual freedom and anti-establishment views. Common punk viewpoints include individual liberty, anti-authoritarianism, and DIY ethic. Non-conformity, anti-corporatism, anti-government, direct action, and not selling out.